I wanted to have an opportunity and appreciated the invitation here to start to familiarize you with some of the areas that are incredibly important now in the workplace associated with data sciences. And it's not just the technical expertise. It's about how you work with teams, how you become a leader, how you become an entrepreneur. So these are soft skills. Let's see if I can get this to work. Okay, I'll need the dongle should be exposed so I can communicate with it. Where's the dongle at? Is it over there? Well, but I can't get. All right, great. So I'm going to use my personal story as a way of highlighting for you what can happen to people who are in something like data sciences. Because I started in this area decades ago before it became popular. In fact, in my youth, I was involved a great deal with gamification in games. Played first chess computer in '77. I played a lot of Go. And where I grew up, I was called a nerd. Actually, at that period of time, we were called eggheads, not nerds. Now, you can see that with the absence of hair now, I certainly fit into that much more easily. And for those of you who are a bit younger, you wouldn't know what a K&E slide rule is other than museum pieces, but this was my tool of trade in high school. My father, who was a factory worker, asked me one year what I wanted for Christmas, and I said log tables and a K&E slide rule. And he says, this stuff and all those books you read, it's going to get you into trouble. It did. I had to move recently, and I had to hire people to move the books. It was just too much for me. So our idea back then of a hardware upgrade was getting 2 magnifiers on your slide rule. That was a big step for us. And my first science project in high school was done on this Monroe comptometer. It's a mechanical, electromechanical calculating device. Have any of you ever been called a nerd? Now you'll notice, by the way, that I use the British and the American spelling of nerd, N-E-R-D and N-U-R-D, okay, just to be international here. I'm sure, especially if you've been involved in data science, you've been accused of being a nerd. Well, there's a lot to that, and there's a lot to growing out of that, and that's what my talk's going to be about today, is how do we balance our technical expertise with the characteristics and qualities of learning how to deal with people in business instead of being shuttered away in a closet somewhere doing your thing. So my first, as a junior and a senior in high school, I went out to the local John Deere factory, got time on an IBM 1130, and started doing a lot of work to build a computer model. Now, many of you may not realize it, but 1967 and 1969 were not the years of the computer models. Okay, this was groundbreaking work. This was disruptive innovation. But my mother had passed away recently, and my physics and chemistry teacher mentored me to get out of the depression. And so he said to me, before you graduate from high school, how would you like to give a paper before the American Academy for the Advancement of Sciences? Of course, I didn't have any idea what that was. And I said, sure. So he spent the next couple of years teaching me Fortran 2, assembler, calculus, and a few other arcane computer languages. And the result was that by the time I graduated from high school, I had been able to use that primitive computer to calculate unique eigenvalues for the cerium 3+ ion and trivalent lanthanide series of elements. Now you notice how that just rolls off my lips, right? And that's because it's been imprinted on my mind since that time. And to do that, though, I had to use a number of very primitive tools in order to do those calculations. And that had been the first time it had been done. And I was a high school student. So I was definitely a dweeb, a nerd, whatever you want to call them, a goober. It just was the thing I did, but I didn't interact very well with people. Now, I ended up with awards from NASA, American Academy for the Advancement of Sciences, and from that, I started working one of these. 1971, Hudson's Bay Company, Winnipeg, Manitoba. You think this is cold? This is not cold, okay? You got to be in Winnipeg, 60 degrees below zero, okay? And there I learned systems programming. We had something called the green card back then, which allowed us to debug through these toggles and lights what was going on inside the computer. And that then allowed me to start to learn how people worked in businesses. So I became part of a couple of companies. And guess what I found? Incredible number of unusual people. Arrogance, okay? Infighting. Difficulty negotiating and communicating. This is not how you carry out a negotiation. Dysfunctional teams. And here I am, a newbie, just out of high school, had not gone to university yet, and I was trying to cope with, how do you get along with people? And I didn't know, there was nobody there to mentor me. I had to kind of struggle my way through that. And of course, we've all been through or seen some of these in relation to the mediocrity and the difficulty and the boringness of workplaces where things don't work. And for those of you involved in data science programs, you're going to run into those all the time. You're going to be immersed in them. And of course, culture. The local culture was very difficult to deal with. They wanted to program you, the corporate people wanted to program you in a certain way on how you reacted, how you thought, how you carried out the work, what the standard operating procedures were. And of course, there I was, technically qualified, but totally unprepared. What do you think is the primary cause of, let's say, customer complaints or employee workplace issues? Young lady, what do you think are the primary causes of that? Good, yes, soft skills. It's all about soft skills. And part of the thing I had never learned, and even later when I went to university, did not learn, it was about the soft skills I needed. And yet, that's exactly in the workplace where you're going to find an incredible need in your upskilling. 77% of employers say soft skills are just as important as hard skills or more important. So getting technically qualified, that's your union card, okay? That gets you in the door. Being able to work with people, that's going to get you promoted. That's going to get you into a leadership position. And of course, most of us are unprepared in the workplace for this tsunami that hits us once we're there. Why? Because we got very good at Python, we got superb at R, but we didn't learn how people interact and negotiate and build teams. So, oh, this is going a little faster. So my journey continued 1985 to 1989. I was a late bloomer. What did that mean? That meant I didn't go and get a bachelor's degree because I was having too much fun being an entrepreneur out of high school, and waited until I was 33 years old to graduate with a bachelor's degree. But I still was a nerd. Look at the title of my bachelor's dissertation. Wow, I can see the glazed look in your eyes as you're starting to try to interpret what that means. The expert system AI model for assessing change management in the strategic planning process. At least this one had to do with business, okay? But I was still a nerd, and I'm still learning about emotional intelligence myself. This is what we're challenged with right now, is the increase in performance around machine learning and artificial intelligence, in robotics, that more and more of this is going to be done by machines. And what's that mean? That means if you get a degree in something like data science and informatics, you got to be better than the machines. You got to learn about what's involved in interacting with people, because the machines will speak to the machines. In fact, one of my niece recently, she's only 12 years old, said to me, I want to become a robotic psychologist. And my response was, they don't teach that yet. Yeah, I know, it'll be 15 years before they teach it, but that's what I'm going to do my degree in. I'm going to be a psychologist for robots who are not getting along with people. Now, she's way ahead of her time, okay? But already we have children dreaming of jobs that don't exist. And even in the work you're doing on a day-to-day basis in data sciences, whatever you learn on today, in 3 years will be out of date. So you've got to be agile. You've got to be flexible. You've got to be able to absorb and learn. The robotics industry is just taking off immensely in North America. Look at the different, I'm having a look, there we go. Look at the different systems out there now for AI, intelligent assistants. I mean, the new emergence of chatbots. We also have, oh, this goes a little bit, maybe if I'm slower it'll work. All right. Internet of Things. The plethora of firms out there that are now doing work in this area, and you're probably going to be employed by one of those firms. But it's moving exceptionally fast, which means your ability to grow in the profession as you leave university has to take into account the fact that these are not going to be the tools that are going to be around in 20 years. Recently, a number of individuals have been pilfered into companies working in artificial intelligence and machine learning at the professorial level because of the kind of work and the speed and velocity we see technology changing. So somehow or other, you've got to be prepared. And what's needed is that human touch. Point of reality. If you can't deal with people, you are not going to progress your career. And I don't know about most of you, but at my age when I was younger, I wanted to make more money, have more authority, and more responsibility as quickly as I could. And that's why emotional intelligence skills are going to provide that kind of foundation for you. Excuse me. I've got to find the direct line between me and my dongle over here. There we are. So these are the top 10 data science skills looked for by employers in the workplace. Communication, listening, teamwork. Has any of you taken a course on listening? Do you know how important listening is instead of trying to get your point across or trying to anticipate what the other person is saying? Leadership, mentoring, flexibility, creativity, negotiation, your presentation skills, and your determination to achieve the goals in the organization you're in. A new dynamic is emerging in the workplace. That dynamic has to do with nonverbal communication skills and your attitude. Neither of those are things you pick up in a Python course. Nobody cares what your attitude is when you're programming Python. What the people you're working with are interested in is your attitude and how you come across to them. 60% of the employers say applicants lack interpersonal and communication skills. Hey, I've been teaching long enough. Most of my learners fall into that category. They have a hard enough time articulating why they couldn't get the homework in on time. 85% of financial success now is going to be due to your ability to communicate. So that's not communicating via TCP, that's communicating via voice and eye movement, proximity, proxemics, your ability to use your hands, your ears, your eyes to be able to say something and express it. So we've got this conundrum right now, hard skills versus soft skills. And many of you are being provided terrific hard skills, but seldom are you introduced to the soft skills necessary for your career success. And where does this fit in? Well, no matter how hard you work, if you don't have the soft skills to go with this, and no matter what your technical strengths are, you do not have a solid career path for development. So, what's missing? Gentlemen at the back, what do you think is missing here? What do we need to integrate into the learning experience to create greater success?
Maybe teach people how really happens outside in the real world, integrate projects, make projects from outside, take projects from outside, work with people who are working.
Excellent. Applied learning, experiential learning, being able to actually do things in the workplace. For example, my undergraduate was done at the University of Waterloo in Waterloo, Ontario. Now, most of you may not know where that's at, but it's our Canadian equivalent of MIT. And they have what's called a co-op program. In the co-op program, you work a semester in comp sci, then you work in a company and get paid for a semester. You work a semester in comp sci at the school, you work in a company. By the time you graduate, you have no student loans because you've been working while you've been going through. You have a portfolio of at least 5 companies you've worked for, and you have innumerable job offers because you have the on-the-job experience. You haven't just thought about this, you've actually done it. You've failed in the workplace, you survived. You can fail. Failure is a great learning process. Once you survive, you go on, you've learned something new, you integrate it into your model, you probably won't do the same thing again. Lessons learned. So there's 2 areas I like to concentrate on now. I have been involved in BI, CI, data analytics, et cetera, in my earlier days. I'm probably getting a little bit too old to handle that level of detail anymore. Programming languages, I'll match my initial skills with anyone here. In fact, during the year 2000 debacle, the director of information systems at Hudson's Bay Company in Winnipeg phoned me up because, it was the year 2000. We got to remediate all this code. So by that time, I was a partner and an executive in a management and systems consulting firm. And I said, why are you calling me up? We have over 400 programs here that we haven't had to change since 1972 in RPG, PL1, COBOL, Assembler, you name it. And we'd like you to come here and remediate the code. And I said, you got to be kidding. You want me to put 2 digits on the end of every bloody year in every program I ever created? Yeah, and we're going to pay you big bucks to do that. I said, you're crazy, and hung up. I mean, reality is, I don't want to do that anymore. What I want to do is help individuals who are involved in this field to learn about their emotional intelligence and the design thinking competencies that they need to be able to do well in a career. That's what I'm spending much of my time doing right now. So we're going to go through an exercise. Sid, if you could give me a hand. These are value cards. You're going to be doing a value card sort right now. You were given a sheet when you began. One for each table? Oh, no, one for each individual. Could anyone else give me a hand here to hand these out? Grab some. If somebody wants to go up there. Thanks. So the exercise is very simple. We're going to start concentrating on EI. 3 back there? Okay. I want you to participate as well. Now remember, I need these cards back. They cost me money, okay? So I don't want you to think of them as a free gift right now. Do we have enough cards for everyone? I think we need a few more down here, Sid. Okay, take the cards out. Shuffle them right now. This is a timed exercise. You will be assessed on your shuffling skills for a moment. Shuffle them up. Quick. Go, 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 go. Shuffle. This is a tactile experience. Come on, get into it. All right, now, you are going to, in step 1, over the next 30 to 45 seconds, you're going to sort these into 3 value piles. What are the values? These are the values that you think are most important for your next 3 years. So you're going to see things like happiness, friendship, etc. You're going to create 3 piles: low, medium, high. So if something comes up and you don't think it's going to be one of your priorities, goes in the low. If you can't make a decision, don't think about it more than a second. This is a cognitive exercise. If you think too long about it, it won't work. That's why speed is involved. And if you think the card and the word on it represent significant value, put it in the high pile. So you got 30 to 45 seconds. Go through the whole deck. Look at one card only one time. Only take a second or a second and a half to look at that word. Put it in high, medium, or low. And there are no right or wrong answers here, so don't worry about that side of it. This is not a regular exam. I don't give exams in my classes. Most of you are about halfway through. If you're not halfway through, speed up. Less than 1 second a card. Now you should have a sheet of paper beside you. You're not going to use that yet. Just make sure you have the sheet of paper for a few seconds from now. All right, 15 seconds left. High, medium, low. High, medium, low. Just look at the word once. Don't go over the decks once you've got them down. "15 seconds left. "13 seconds. No pressure. Okay, I see most people finishing up. 5 seconds left. 4, 3, 3.5, 2, 1. Now, take your low and medium piles and put them aside. They're irrelevant for the next step. Step 2. Go through that pile that was your high values and now sort them into low, medium, and high. So all those high valued things, you're going to start to cull those out. So only take your high value cards and sort them into low, medium, and high, just as quickly as you did the previous. And in fact, you've got fewer cards, or most of you should. And if you're indecisive on something, put it in the medium pile. Don't fret over it. Low, medium, high. Most of you are starting to finish up. Another 5 to 8 seconds. All right. I see most people are done. We're pretty much near the end. Now, step 3. Whoops, wrong way. Step 3. Do exactly the same thing you just did. Take the high pile, put aside low and medium. You don't even want to look at them again. And now put them into low, medium, and high yet again. We are doing a priority value card sort. And emotionally and cognitively, you are looking at words and expressing a particular reaction to those words as values for the next 3 years for you personally. Good. I see almost everyone has gotten through. Next step, prioritize your high-value cards. Whatever is left in your high-value pile, you want to pick 5 of those and put those names on the sheet you have available to you. And if you only have 3, then you have a well-focused future. So choose only 5 and write those words on the sheet of paper you were given when you came in. Sid will come around in a moment or so to collect those from you. Now remember, as you're going through these piles, don't give it too much thought. You look at the word and you put it into high, low, or medium. And then at the very end, you only pick your top 5 if you have 5 left. Now, what have you done? Basically, you've used your subconscious to determine your future, and you did it by word association. This is a normal psychological construct that's used, and you've tried to interpret those words in terms of your own future and what's going to be important for you in your future. So put aside the cards now. Sid will come around and pick up your sheets, and he'll tabulate those while I'm continuing to talk. So let's stop the value card sort. All right. Question from an emotional intelligence point of view. How many of you are aware what your blind spots are? Raise your hand. I should see no hands here. They're called blind spots for a reason, okay? You don't know. You have no idea. Your goal when you start to develop your emotional intelligence skills is to get past those blind spots, because those are the ones that are going to hold you back in the workplace. Now, how do we really promote and develop these skills, especially if we're going to create very innovative data scientists? Because I think that's really the goal here at Indiana University. You're not just going to be one of a number of data scientists. You've got to be creative and innovative. And design theory is one way to do that, design thinking. In design thinking, we have a human-centric approach to looking at design in the workplace. And in that human-centric approach, we're looking at functional innovation, process innovation, experience innovation, and emotional innovation. That's all driven from the design thinking skill set. One of the ways that design theory tries to relate to this is called empathy. Your ability, and this is called an empathy map in design thinking. You build a map of your potential customer or user for what you're being asked to do, and you start to ask some very loaded questions. What do they think and feel? How are they influenced? What's the environment like? What's their behavior like? That will then allow you to start to encapsulate whatever deliverable you've been tasked with to appropriately fit your customer or client. Because one of the things as an executive who has used data scientists in my companies and as a data scientist, the biggest problem we have is the iteration process that goes on, because once you show something to the executive or to a professional line manager, they kind of go, oh yeah, that's what I asked for, but no, that's not what I want. And then you just go through the process yet again and again and again until at some point you get frustrated, your customer gets frustrated. However, if you used an empathy map to begin with, you could shortcut the amount of iterations that you have to go through. Because what you're trying to dig into is how they see the world. What is their mindset? How will they see the numbers or the visuals that you present to them when you present them? Will they be able to properly interpret them? Can they make sense of them? So your job is to anticipate that. And that's what design theory allows you to do. Now, design theory does not cut out the prototyping and options identification stages. Those are really important. But what it does provide you are a set of skills in the workplace where you can do more with less. Because the last thing you want is for someone saying, I've tasked Joe with that 3 weeks ago. He's come back 3 times. He just doesn't understand what I want. Well, that's not the reputation you want to build. You want to build a reputation where you can anticipate what that individual can use. Not what they want. Often what they want is not what they can use. You've got to go past what they want to how and why and what they can utilize to make a decision. Because as a data scientist, often what you're presenting is information for decision making. Senior, middle-level management, professional marketing, whatever, market intelligence. And you've got to be able to short-circuit that process and provide them with usable, actionable information to create new knowledge. So critical thinking, design thinking intersect along these axes to create very reflective analysis of a situation, to really start to build a narrative or a story around the data. And this is one of the things I teach in many of my MBA and undergrad classes is how do we do storytelling? How do we create a story with the data that's compelling, that's truthful and authentic, that can be used? And with that story, how do we create a visual to go along with it? Now, I even tell my learners, I don't care if you create little stick men and women. Create a visual that goes along with your story. Create the storyboard. Convey that to your customer and client, because they need that to connect the story to another part of their brain. So you're really dealing with neuroscience. So this whole area of design theory, design thinking, as we know in the HCI area, provides us with a process that requires very, very high emotional intelligence quotients. So it's not about your IQ anymore. It's about your EQ. And that's why I titled the presentation EI, not AI. I don't care how well you can program in an AI language. Can you convey the ideas to me? Can you provide me with a business value proposition about what you've discovered that makes what you did technically useful? And then I, as an executive or a manager, can see much more potential for mentoring and coaching you to move into management, to get an executive experience and vision, because you don't get that just by hanging around doing the same thing over and over. Otherwise, a data scientist is no better than the person who cleans the toilet, because they do it over and over again, and somebody comes in, checks it, well, it looks clean, right? And then you just do it again and again. You want to do more than that. And especially when we see how robotics and machine learning is affecting our workplaces. I really appreciate your ability to move when I come by the way. When machine learning and robotics are affecting our workplace, it's really important that we start to understand how the people fit in. The people side is the most important for your career growth. If you can't communicate, if you can't relate, if you can't be led, if you can't be a team lead, you're useless. You're a technician. And there's much more to life than being a technician. Been there, done that. I got a sweatshirt that says so. That's not what you want to be. You want to be much more. And in fact, then you have significant impact on your workplace as well as on the world. And if we think of data science as the emergent new suite of tools over the last decade and a half or 2 decades, I think it's to make the world a better place. It's not to create bigger NSAs that wonder what you're doing, okay? Or CIAs. It's about you working in organizations to create a better place for people. And yet, have any of you watched the first episode of Hunted yet? Anybody? Wow. Highly recommend it. Anybody know what Hunted is? People go undercover. They try not to be found. And the first episode was classic. You had these 2 people. The young lady was a previous Miss North Carolina, really good looking. Young man, hunk of a guy, comes from a big family. They got caught like in the first 30 minutes of the show, right? Because they'd never been on the street. They didn't know how to go underground. They didn't know how to avoid the cameras, the CC cameras all over the place. They didn't know how to stop using their ATM cards because the camera takes your photograph when you do. They didn't know how to disappear. Now we're starting to live in a world that mirrors something I envisioned when I was much younger and read 1984. And that's a world in which we're presented with lots of data about ourselves everywhere. So every keystroke on Google, every telephone call you make is monitored. Now, not directly, but at least indirectly. Because if ever you become a suspect or a target, I can tell you, after having worked at 3 years, Canadian Security Intelligence Service, I was brought in to re-engineer about 20 years ago all of their intelligence and administrative systems. They hadn't changed since the early days of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So think horses, horse manure, they hadn't kept up. So they had to bring in an outsider to re-engineer the organization. And we were involved in those very early years in something called information warfare. What's it called now? Cyber warfare. There were early attempts by our intelligence agents, along with the USA, Singapore, MI5, MI6, to get into the power grids in what at that time were called countries behind the Iron Curtain. That was our goal. That was information warfare. Well, how'd that work for us? At least the wall came down, but now we have all kinds of other emergent problems. It wasn't necessarily the Cold War that we should have been concentrating on. It was about human beings. So when we look at high emotional intelligence quotient, you have to be able to build skills around problem finding, problem solving, solution testing. And a design theory approach helps to facilitate that. Now here's just another view of the same thing when we think of EI, not AI, and that is you've got to, most of you are developing your expertise side. That's great. It's the empathy exploration and execution in the workplace that you've got to refine. And I can't overemphasize to you how emotional intelligence skills are going to give you those capabilities. You will stand out in a way that none of your colleagues or peers will. Why? Because you're going to be thinking much bigger than the technical platform you're on or the programming language you're using. And senior management, executives are going to appreciate that, and you have a better opportunity to move both within that organization and across other organizations. Sid, have we got a tabulation yet? Great. Thank you, Sid. Yeah, top 5. Great. Wow, this is an interesting reflection of our audience. So this is a tabulation of all of them that were filled in. Number 1 is health. I'm very encouraged to hear that because I was brought up on pizzas and Coca-Cola, and I can tell you at my age, it hasn't done me very well, okay? So I'm very encouraged to see health as a significant value for your future. Happiness, there you go. Happiness. I work with a professor in psychology who has developed the theory of flow, and flow is about happiness in the workplace. How do we create a workplace and a home place and a community space where happiness, which is unquantifiable and very difficult to determine the ROI of, becomes the norm? Because guess what? In our workplaces right now, 80% of the workplaces are dysfunctional. Most people are not engaged, they're not committed, they're not interested in what they're doing. They're just doing something to get a salary. I promise you, doing something to get a salary, you could be a sanitation engineer or a garbage person. I would have said garbage man, but I'm being gender neutral. A garbage person, that's just doing a job. Obviously, you're in a program like data sciences because you want to engage your mind. Communication. It does sound like many of you have identified communication as a very significant priority. This is great. And communication is not just speaking a language well, it's conveying your abstract thoughts to other people in a way they can make sense. Because if it was just conveying words, then you could pick up any text or any online book, read it, and know what it says. Reality is, most books take an interpretation algorithm in your mind to make sense of them. Wisdom and love and affection tied for number 4. Again, affection connected to happiness, love connected to happiness. These are very aspirational values. I congratulate you on identifying significant values. Nobody put here to find a job or to get rich. That's great. That's not what the world's about. I can confirm that. And 5th, family. At least we see a significant reflection of the value proposition of family. Now, regretfully, one of the reasons I was a nerd, I was raised in a very dysfunctional family. So I spent most of my time trying to go to the library, the public library where I grew up, because it was the only place I could get away from the screaming, the hollering, the fighting. And that's where I discovered people who would play games with me. And that was fun. And when it became fun, I learned more about mathematics. I learned more about something called chemistry. I'm sure three-dimensional probability contour calculations for the cerium 3+ ion just will put you to sleep. But it was the underlying models that were very important and interesting to me. So within the current data sciences program, what I really want to emphasize is the integration of new skills into the way you work. And you as learners can request that. Those of you who are faculty can instantiate that. You can create it. So the critical success factors that I've been able to identify for a successful data scientist starts out with inquisitiveness and creativity, build toward empathy, include communication capabilities, find out what it's like to properly work in teams. You know, I often have learners come into my classes saying, oh, whatever you do, don't put us in teams. I always get that one guy on the team or one lady who doesn't do the job. And so I said, well, in the workplace, we'll create an escalation procedure for that. Well, what's that mean? Well, you guys do an intervention with your team member. If they're not working well, we'll come together. We do a group intervention. And if that person does not want to take responsibility, they got to do all of the exercises and the team-based work on their own. I have yet to get to the point I've had to marginalize a learner to do all the work by themselves. Because as soon as an individual learns that they got to do it by themselves, they start to do the work. Team-based behavior, something you've got to learn how to make this work, because all of you will be working in teams. You're not solo practitioners. From that, you'll build your self-confidence and assertiveness, and you'll be able to convey to your management your trustworthiness, authenticity. Because as you know, in the kind of data you work with, how do you determine you can trust the data? Well, one of the ways you do that is how much you trust the individual who's bringing you the data, and whether that person has dug deeply into the assumptions and presumptions behind the data. So what I want you to think in terms of the learners that are here is develop your own path, build your own journey here on how you're going to acquire some of these skills. And one of the best ways to do that is through a coaching model. Coaching and mentoring. The apprenticeship model, which went out of vogue for a long period of time, is an incredibly useful model for learning from a master. And in the apprenticeship model, we have the apprentice, the fellowcraft, and the master. There's only 3 levels, you know. And if you're into badges, you're going to be wearing the apprenticeship badge a long time, okay? And with the capability to learn from a coach or a mentor, you're going to establish different habits and skills and practices that are going to be quite distinct from your peers and colleagues from other universities in the workplace. You will stand out in a positive way, not a negative way. And you can build the kind of relationships that will skyrocket your career long term into some of the goals and career aspirations that you have. So here's just a checklist. I'm going to leave this with you. Your final takeaways, here's your coachee plan. So there's coaches and coachees. There's mentors, mentees. Okay? So as a potential coachee, these are ways to identify someone either here or in the workplace that can become your mentor and coach. Ask them these questions. Ask them how they would help you to achieve some of these goals and some of these activities. And if they stumble about and don't really know what they're going to be talking about, you don't want them as a coach. You might have more skills to coach them. But find someone who can answer some of these simple questions and can provide you with some tools over the next couple of years that will increase your emotional intelligence quotient. You're really looking for these in a good coach or a mentor. Empathy, integrity, honesty, authenticity, active listening, support when you need it. Now, active listening is the one you can very quickly ascertain. Because if you meet someone who thinks they're the best coach in the world and they spend the next 25 minutes telling you that, that's not active listening. They're not a good coach. What they are is very egotistical about what they think they can do. You want someone who's humble, who's actually done it before, has got the experience, and can help you through the rough spots you're going to encounter in your career. That kind of concludes my remarks on EI, not AI. I really appreciate that we've had an opportunity at least to interact slightly with the card deck. It's better than just listening to a boring lecture. You got to use your hands, your emotions, your mind. I'd really like to entertain some questions if you have any at this stage on this whole topic of emotional intelligence. Wow, if I got no questions, I got a problem.
Send comments in the chat window.
Chat room might be full of comments, but we're in real time here.
So are those people.
What comes to mind for yourself?
Well, I was thinking of a question for you. So, what can teams do to build
Rapport.
amongst themselves?
What you need is an individual with some experience in team building that can give you some tips on the challenges, concerns, and barriers of team-based behavior. Teams that do not exhibit teamship are just groups. We have a lot of groups calling themselves teams. They're not, because there is no cohesion amongst them. There is no relationship to the goal. And there is no sense of empathy to help their teammates begin. So it's not that easy to create teams. Next. It's not that easy to create teams. The question was, how are teams? How are the best ways to create teams? If teamship was easy, the U.S. economy would have no problems. Okay? We've watched in this recent election the lack of a sense of team building toward a nation. We have seen total fractionalization. Well, that's not the way we can create a world. We can create a world with dissent because there is a place in a team to listen to the dissenting voice. It can only make the achievement of the goal better by listening to what went wrong. For example, Alfred P. Sloan at GM, he would work very long hours with his executive team. And if, when he asked a question about a strategy or a direction that they were going to go in, if everyone basically said, yes, great idea, he'd say, no, it's not. We got to find something wrong with it. So he would play devil's advocate and rip it apart. At which point, of course, it would confuse all the other executives because they thought they had a good idea. So there is a need in teamship to be able to follow your team members as well as be led. And these are skills that many of us have not been brought up with. Now, sports is a great way to build that kind of relationship, but sports teams are not directly transferable to the workplace. I mean, if you think of Michael Jordan, well, I think there was one game Michael Jordan was involved in where he was asked to go out and pass the ball to someone else. He says, no, I make the goals. I make the passes. And the coach sidelined him. And afterwards, he was asked by a reporter, why didn't you go out? Your coach was telling you to do something. It's all about me, right? Michael Jordan, it's all about me. No, it's about the team. So to work well in a team means we have to be humble in our expectations of each other. Does that help to kind of create a framework?
We do have one question.
Dialogue. See? Just a second. We have an in-person. I'm going to take the in-person person versus the chat person. Right.
How do you find the right balance between team effort and your individuality?
What's the first part of the question?
How do you find the right balance between the teamwork and individuality? How do you know what kind of effort you have to put individually and get along with your team when it comes to creativity?
Great question. Great question. It's culturally based. That's the easy answer. Now, I come from Canada, and in my very early years, I was an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship was discouraged in Canada because we're a socialist state. 60% of the people work for one level of government or another. So whether it's provincial, state, or federal, or provincial, federal, or city, everybody works for the government. Entrepreneurs were never recognized back then. And in fact, it wasn't until I came to the US that I could be entrepreneurial. So my individual trait of entrepreneurship was one that was totally discouraged in the culture I was in. When I came here, what I then had to do was to learn how to work with other entrepreneurs because they had just as original ideas as I did. And the biggest challenge then is being able to work with those thinkers and figure out who do we put the effort behind with the best idea with the shortest return on an investment. So if I would take individual versus team efforts, if as an individual you can solve a problem almost immediately, do it, but find a way to bring your team along. If, however, the problem, and most problems today are highly complex, most of us individuals do not have the capability to solve the problems. So we have to find a team that can solve the problem. Close up. One more question. All right. Which one do you guys have been reading this? What will be your suggestion if group members don't share the same goal? Get off the team. Is it better to find other people or find something in common to work on? Use your negotiating skills and try to bring the errant team member into the goal. But if you can't, you marginalize them, get rid of them, because all they're going to do is create friction, and you're not going to be able to achieve the goal. So this is one of the biggest challenges around team building and team delivery. If someone creates too much friction, they're holding you back. Get rid of them. Get another team member. I mean, the reality is there should be at least 3 or 4 other people in line who are very interested in achieving that goal. You don't have to put up with mediocrity. Ask for excellence. Great.
Let's all thank Dr. Sutton again. That was really cool. If we have questions afterwards, maybe I can collate them and
Sure.
to you. I'll see if we do the same.
That's great. Thanks for taking time after lunch, hardest period of time. I didn't see anyone dozing off or sleeping. That was fantastic. So thanks for being here and participating.